The gentle autumn breeze swept through the quiet suburbs of Portland as Machen walked through her neighborhood park one last time. At 8 months pregnant, her steps were careful and measured, one hand resting protectively over her growing belly. The morning sun cast long shadows across the walking path, and fallen leaves crunched beneath her feet. Little did anyone know that this peaceful morning walk would be the last time anyone would see her. May had everything going for her: a loving husband, David, who worked as a software engineer at a local tech company, a successful career as a pediatric nurse, and a baby girl on the way. Their modest 2-story home was already filled with stuffed animals, a carefully decorated nursery, and the warmth of anticipated parenthood. That Thursday morning started like any other. David kissed her goodbye before heading to work, reminding her about their evening plans to visit her parents for dinner. May had decided to take advantage of her maternity leave to prepare for the baby's arrival, organizing the nursery and taking short walks as recommended by her doctor. At 10:43 a.m., she sent a text to her best friend Lily: "Just finished my morning walk. Going to grab some ginger tea from that new cafe on Pine Street. The little one's been extra active today." Red heart, it would be the last message anyone would receive from her. By 7 p.m., panic had set in. David had rushed home from work when May didn't show up at her parents' house and wasn't answering her phone. Their home showed no signs of disturbance, her prenatal vitamins still lined up on the kitchen counter, her favorite fuzzy slippers by the couch, and her half-finished baby journal open on the dining table. The police were called, and the community mobilized. Search parties combed through every inch of the neighborhood park. Missing person posters featuring May's smiling face and prominent baby bump appeared on every street corner. Local news stations ran the story, and social media buzzed with theories and concerns. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The nursery, once a symbol of joy and anticipation, became a frozen tableau of what should have been. David kept everything exactly as May had arranged it, hoping against hope that she would return to rock their daughter in the carefully chosen chair by the window. The investigation hit dead end after dead end. Security cameras had captured May entering the cafe on Pine Street, purchasing her tea, and leaving at 11:15 a.m. After that, she seemed to vanish into thin air. No suspicious transactions appeared on her credit cards, no activity on her phone or email accounts. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. The case grew cold, but David never gave up. He hired private investigators, consulted psychics, despite his skepticism, and maintained a website dedicated to finding May. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, he organized a candlelight vigil in the park where she was last seen, drawing supporters from across the state. What made the case particularly haunting was the timing: a woman, just weeks away from giving birth, disappearing without a trace. The question that tormented everyone wasn't just about May's fate, but also that of her unborn child. Had the baby been born? Were they both still alive somewhere? The local business community rallied around the cause. Companies donated to a reward fund that grew to substantial size, hoping to incentivize anyone with information to come forward. But despite the financial motivation, no credible leads emerged. For 5 long years, the mystery of May Chen's disappearance would remain one of Portland's most puzzling cold cases. The community never forgot about the pregnant nurse who vanished on that autumn morning, but no one could have predicted the shocking chain of events that would finally unravel the truth, a truth that would shake the very foundation of the city's corporate world and challenge everything everyone thought they knew about that fateful day. As the 5th anniversary of her disappearance approached, a new CEO at one of Portland's largest healthcare companies would unknowingly stumble upon information that would crack the case wide open. But the truth would prove more startling than anyone could have imagined, leading to a series of revelations that would leave the entire community questioning how well they really knew their neighbors, their colleagues, and their trusted institutions. Rachel Zhao never expected to find herself at the helm of Portland's largest healthcare provider, Cascade Health Systems. At 38, she was one of the youngest CEOs in the company's history, and the first woman to hold the position. Her appointment came after a major leadership shakeup following a series of controversial decisions by the previous administration. On a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 5 years and 2 months after Mei Chen's disappearance, Rachel sat in her new office reviewing old company files. As part of her commitment to transparency, she had ordered a comprehensive audit of all departmental records from the past decade. It was tedious work, but necessary to understand the organization she had inherited. Between sips of coffee, she noticed something odd in the financial records from 5 years ago. A series of payments, each just under $50,000, had been made to a shell company called Pine Valley Consulting. The payment started 3 months before Mei's disappearance and continued for 6 months afterward. What caught Rachel's attention wasn't just the timing, it was the authorizing signature, Dr. Andrew Parker, the former head of obstetrics. Dr. Parker had left Cascade Health suddenly 4 years ago, citing personal reasons. He had been well respected in the medical community, known for his groundbreaking research in high-risk pregnancies. But something about these payments didn't sit right with Rachel. She pulled up Dr. Parker's personnel file on her computer. As she scrolled through his history, her heart nearly stopped. There it was, a connection she couldn't believe no one had noticed before. Dr. Parker had been Mei Chen's obstetrician throughout her pregnancy. Rachel's hands trembled as she dug deeper. She discovered that Pine Valley Consulting had been registered just 2 weeks before the first payment, and dissolved exactly 1 month after the final payment. The registered address led to an empty lot on the outskirts of town. That evening, instead of heading home, Rachel drove to the public library. She spent hours going through newspaper archives, cross-referencing dates and names. A pattern began to emerge, one that made her blood run cold. In the 3 years before Mei's disappearance, 4 other pregnant women had transferred out of Dr. Parker's care suddenly, all citing moves to other states. All of them had been in their 3rd trimester. All of them had been carrying girls. And none of them had any social media presence or public records after their supposed relocations. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something much bigger than financial irregularities. She needed help, but she had to be careful. Too many people at Cascade Health had connections to the old administration. She reached out to an old friend from law school, now a detective with the Portland Police Department. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant far from the hospital, Rachel shared her discoveries. The detective listened intently, taking careful notes. "The thing is," Rachel explained, pushing a folder across the table, "these payments weren't just random. They coincided with specific dates in Dr. Parker's surgical schedule. Days when he had blocked out his calendar for private research." The detective's eyes widened as she reviewed the documents. "These dates, 3 of them match days when we had unusual activity reported at Portland Harbor. Security cameras caught someone in medical scrubs accessing one of the private docks in the middle of the night. We investigated at the time, but without probable cause. The investigation quietly reopened, but this time with a different focus. Investigators began tracking Dr. Parker's current whereabouts. He had seemingly disappeared into thin air after leaving Cascade Health, but his financial footprint told a different story. A breakthrough came when Rachel received an anonymous email from a former nurse who had worked with Dr. Parker. The message was brief but chilling: "Check the basement of Building C. Behind the old radiology archives. There's something you need to see." Building C was one of the oldest structures on Cascade Health's campus, now used mainly for storage. Rachel and the detective, accompanied by a forensics team, made their way down to the basement level after hours. The radiology archives were exactly where the email had described, filled with dusty files and outdated equipment. But it was what they found behind those files that would blow the case wide open. Hidden behind a false wall, they discovered a small room. Inside, perfectly preserved, were 5 sets of patient files, each belonging to one of the missing pregnant women. And there, on top of the stack, was Mei Chen's file. The documents inside would reveal a conspiracy so profound, it would shake the medical community to its core. But the real shock wasn't in what they found, it was in realizing that this discovery was just the beginning. Because scribbled in the margins of May's file was a series of coordinates, leading to a location that would finally answer the question everyone had been asking for 5 years: what really happened to May Chen and her unborn child? As Rachel stared at those numbers, she realized that solving this mystery might cost her everything she had worked for. But she couldn't stop now. Somewhere out there, May Chen's family was still waiting for answers. And Rachel was beginning to suspect that May might not be the only one who needed saving. The truth, as it turned out, was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. And it was about to come crashing down on Portland's medical establishment like a tidal wave, sweeping away decades of secrets in its wake. The coordinates from May's file led to an abandoned wellness center in the secluded mountains of Oregon, 3 hours from Portland. As Rachel and Detective Lin Wong drove up the winding road, the morning fog clung to the pine trees like a protective shroud. The facility, once advertised as an exclusive retreat for expectant mothers, had closed its doors 4 years ago, shortly after Dr. Parker's departure from Cascade Health. The detective had insisted they wait for backup, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. As they approached the imposing gates, they noticed something unusual: fresh tire tracks in the muddy driveway. "Someone's been here recently," Detective Wong observed, drawing her flashlight. The lock on the gate had been replaced within the last few months, its shine standing out against the weathered chain. After calling in their location to dispatch, they proceeded carefully. The wellness center consisted of several interconnected buildings, their once pristine white walls now stained with years of neglect. But as they circled the main structure, they noticed something odd: one of the smaller buildings had new security cameras installed. Through the windows, they could see that while most of the complex was covered in dust and cobwebs, this particular section appeared maintained. A soft humming sound emanated from within, the unmistakable sound of active climate control systems. Before they could investigate further, a car approached. They quickly concealed themselves behind some overgrown shrubs. A sleek black SUV pulled up, and a woman in medical scrubs stepped out, carrying what looked like a cooler with medical transport markings. Detective Wong photographed the vehicle's license plate while Rachel's heart pounded. The woman entered the building using an electronic key card, completely unaware of their presence. 20 minutes later, backup arrived, including a forensics team and several armed officers. With a warrant quickly obtained based on the evidence from Cascade Health, they entered the building. What they found inside would haunt them forever. The facility had been converted into a state-of-the-art private medical center. But it wasn't just any medical center, it was an illegal fertility operation. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place, revealing a scheme more elaborate than anyone could have imagined. In one room, they found detailed records of wealthy clients from around the world. Another room contained sophisticated medical equipment, all purchased through shell companies linked to Pine Valley Consulting. But it was the discovery in the basement that finally revealed the full scope of Dr. Parker's operation. A hidden elevator, concealed behind what appeared to be a storage closet, led to an underground level. There, they found 5 women, all former patients of Dr. Parker, all reported missing during their 3rd trimester. And among them was May Chen. The women were being kept in comfortable but secure rooms, monitored constantly by medical staff. They had been selected for a horrifying reason: each carried a child with extremely rare genetic markers that made them valuable to wealthy clients seeking designer babies. May, barely conscious when they found her, had been kept in an induced coma between pregnancies. Over the 5 years of her captivity, she had been forced to serve as a surrogate multiple times, her unique genetic profile making her especially valuable to Dr. Parker's operation. The other women shared similar stories. They had been chosen because their pregnancies showed specific genetic markers that Dr. Parker's wealthy clients desired. He had orchestrated their disappearances, using his position at Cascade Health to falsify records and his connections in the medical community to create an underground surrogacy ring. The staff working at the facility were mostly foreign medical professionals, brought in under false pretenses and threatened into compliance. Many of them believed they were working for a legitimate, though secretive, medical research facility. As the women were safely evacuated and taken to legitimate medical facilities, Rachel discovered something that made the case even more personal. Among Dr. Parker's files was evidence that her own appointment as CEO hadn't been as coincidental as she'd thought. The previous board members who had supported her appointment had been carefully chosen and manipulated by Dr. Parker's associates. They had selected her because of her reputation for being thorough and ethical, qualities they believed would help legitimize Cascade Health and draw attention away from their ongoing operation. The investigation also revealed a network of corrupt officials and medical professionals who had helped cover up the operation. The payments Rachel had discovered were just the tip of the iceberg. Dr. Parker had built an entire shadow organization, using the legitimacy of Cascade Health as a cover. But where was Dr. Parker himself? As law enforcement officials combed through the facility's security footage and financial records, they began to uncover a trail that led to various locations around the globe. The doctor had been traveling under multiple aliases, meeting with wealthy clients and overseeing similar operations in other countries. David Chen was immediately notified about May's rescue. When he arrived at the hospital, the reunion was both joyous and heartbreaking. 5 years of separation had taken their toll, and the road to recovery would be long. As news of the discovery broke, more families came forward with stories of suspicious circumstances surrounding their loved ones' pregnancies at Cascade Health. The case was expanding beyond anything Rachel or Detective Wong had initially imagined. But this wasn't the end of the story. As May began to recover and share her experience, she revealed information that would lead investigators to an even more shocking discovery, one that would expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of international healthcare and pharmaceutical companies. The truth about Dr. Parker's actual location and the full extent of his global operation was about to come to light, and with it, the revelation of who had really been pulling the strings all along. The next phase of the investigation would take them far beyond Portland, into a world where medical ethics and human dignity had been sacrificed on the altar of profit and scientific ambition. As May Chen recovered in Portland's top medical facility, her memories began to resurface like pieces of a broken mirror slowly coming together. Each fragment revealed more about Dr. Parker's elaborate network and the powerful figures behind it. Detective Wong spent hours gently interviewing her, piecing together the complex puzzle of the past 5 years. There was another doctor, May recalled, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. She would visit every few months. The staff called her Dr. K, and everyone seemed afraid of her. She spoke with a British accent and always carried a red leather briefcase with a golden snake emblem. This detail proved to be the key that unlocked the next phase of the investigation. The snake emblem belonged to Helios Pharmaceutical, a multinational corporation based in London. Its CEO, Dr. Catherine Kensington, was a renowned figure in reproductive medicine and had co-authored several papers with Dr. Parker in the past. Rachel Zhao found herself flying to London with Detective Wong and 2 FBI agents. The case had now become an international investigation, drawing attention from law enforcement agencies worldwide. As they dug deeper, they discovered that Helios Pharmaceutical had been funding a series of revolutionary fertility research projects across multiple continents. Meanwhile, back in Portland, David Chen had taken a leave of absence from his job to help May adjust to freedom. The media circus surrounding their reunion had been overwhelming, but they found strength in each other and the support of their community. Their story had touched hearts worldwide, leading to increased scrutiny of private fertility clinics and their practices. In London, the investigation team met with British authorities who had been conducting their own inquiry into Helios. A whistleblower from within the company had come forward with disturbing information about their secret research facilities. Dr. Kensington wasn't just funding Parker's operation, explained Detective Inspector James from Scotland Yard. She was using it as a proof of concept for a much larger project. They were developing a method to identify and enhance specific genetic markers in unborn children. The pregnant women weren't just surrogates, they were unwitting test subjects. The team discovered that Helios had similar facilities in Dubai, Singapore, and Buenos Aires. Each location operated under the guise of an exclusive wellness retreat, targeting pregnant women with specific genetic profiles. The company's true goal was to perfect a controversial genetic modification technique that would allow wealthy clients to enhance their unborn children's physical and cognitive capabilities. As they built their case against Helios, Rachel received an unexpected call from one of her board members at Cascade Health. "Dr. Kensington is in Portland," he whispered urgently. "She's cleaning house. Several former employees connected to Parker have disappeared in the last 48 hours. The race was on." Detective Wong immediately flew back to Portland with 2 FBI agents, while Rachel stayed in London to continue working with British authorities. They had to move quickly before more evidence was destroyed and more witnesses vanished. In Portland, they tracked Dr. Kensington to an upscale hotel near the waterfront. But when they arrived at her room, they found only her laptop and a stack of documents. The documents revealed something unexpected: Dr. Parker hadn't been the mastermind they'd assumed. He was just another pawn in Dr. Kensington's larger scheme. The laptop contained encrypted files that, once decoded, exposed the true scope of Helios's operations. They weren't just experimenting with genetic enhancement. They were collecting genetic data from thousands of unsuspecting patients worldwide, building a massive database of human genetic information that they planned to use for future experiments. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. One of the nurses who had cared for May during her captivity came forward with a recorded conversation between Dr. Parker and Dr. Kensington. The recording revealed that May hadn't been chosen at random. She had been specifically targeted because of a unique genetic marker that made her immune to a rare genetic disorder. This marker was the key to Helios's most ambitious project, developing a method to eliminate certain genetic diseases before birth. While the goal seemed noble, their methods were anything but. They had been experimenting on women without their knowledge or consent, all in the name of scientific progress. The investigation also uncovered a disturbing connection between Helios and several prominent fertility clinics worldwide. These clinics had been secretly sharing patient data with Helios, helping them identify potential candidates for their experiments. As the evidence mounted, international arrest warrants were issued for Dr. Kensington and her top executives. But the doctor seemed to always be one step ahead, leaving a trail of destroyed evidence and disappeared witnesses in her wake. The case took an unexpected turn when Rachel discovered that one of her own board members at Cascade Health had been Dr. Kensington's inside source for years. He had helped cover up suspicious activities and had warned her about the investigation. When confronted, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. His information led them to a private airstrip outside Portland where Dr. Kensington was planning to flee the country. Detective Wong and her team arrived just as the doctor's private jet was preparing for takeoff. The arrest was made without incident, but Dr. Kensington's calm demeanor suggested she still had cards left to play. The story exploded in the international media. Headlines around the world proclaimed the discovery of the illegal genetic research ring. Helios's stock price plummeted, and clinics associated with the company faced intense scrutiny and investigation. But for May and David Chen, the most important development was much more personal. During her recovery, doctors discovered that despite everything she had endured, May was pregnant again, this time naturally. The baby was healthy, and all genetic tests showed no signs of manipulation. As part 4 of this incredible story drew to a close, it seemed that justice was finally being served. But Dr. Kensington's confident smile during her arrest suggested that there were still secrets to be uncovered. The investigation was far from over, and the next revelation would shake the medical world to its core, raising questions about the very nature of human genetic research and its regulation. The courthouse in downtown Portland buzzed with activity on the morning of Dr. Catherine Kensington's preliminary hearing. News vans lined the streets, and journalists from around the world crowded the steps, all waiting to catch a glimpse of the woman who had orchestrated one of the largest medical conspiracies in history. Inside, Rachel Zhao sat next to Detective Wong, both women tense with anticipation. Across the aisle, May and David Chen held hands, their presence a testament to the human cost of Helios Pharmaceuticals' illegal experiments. May's baby bump was now visible, a symbol of hope amid the darkness they had endured. Dr. Kensington entered the courtroom with the confident stride of someone who still believed they held all the cards. Her legal team, consisting of some of the most expensive lawyers in the world, carried stacks of documents and wore expressions of cool assurance. But their confidence was about to be shattered by an unexpected witness. Dr. Parker himself had been found, not in hiding, but in a private medical facility in Switzerland. He had suffered a stroke 6 months earlier, and in his weakened state, his conscience had finally broken. He had recorded a detailed video confession, which the prosecution was about to play. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Parker's face appeared on the screen. His once commanding presence was diminished by illness, but his words were clear and devastating. He revealed that Helios's experiments went far beyond genetic enhancement. They had been working on something much more controversial, the ability to create human chimeras, beings with combined genetic traits from multiple sources. Dr. Kensington didn't just want to enhance genes, Parker explained in the video. She wanted to create a new kind of human being. The pregnant women we targeted weren't just chosen for their genetic markers, they were chosen because their bodies could potentially host these experimental embryos. The revelation sent shockwaves through the medical community. But it was Dr. Parker's next statement that truly stunned the courtroom. He revealed that several members of Helios's board of directors had undergone the experimental procedures themselves, using surrogates to carry genetically modified embryos. They wanted to create a generation of enhanced children, he continued. Children who would inherit their wealth and power, but with genetic advantages that would ensure their dominance in every field: intelligence, physical capabilities, even longevity. As the video played, Dr. Kensington's composed facade began to crack. Her lawyers huddled together, frantically whispering among themselves. But the prosecution wasn't finished. They had another surprise witness, one of the scientists who had worked in Helios's Singapore facility. Dr. Lin Jing took the stand, her hands shaking but her voice steady. She described how she had initially believed she was working on legitimate genetic research to cure diseases. When she discovered the truth, she had secretly begun documenting everything. The Singapore facility wasn't just a research center, she testified. It was a training ground. They were preparing to expand their operations globally. They had identified potential surrogates in 12 different countries. If they hadn't been stopped, thousands of women could have been taken. Throughout the testimony, Rachel couldn't help but notice how the gallery had filled with pregnant women, former patients of Cascade Health who had come to show support for May and demand answers about their own pregnancies. The sight of them made the stakes of this case even more real. The prosecution then revealed their strongest piece of evidence, a database recovered from Dr. Kensington's laptop. It contained profiles of over 50,000 women worldwide, all potential targets for Helios's experiments. Each profile included detailed genetic information, medical histories, and personal data that had been collected without consent. But the most damaging revelation came from Dr. Kensington's personal emails. They showed that she had been working with a network of corrupt government officials and healthcare executives to ensure her experiments could continue undisturbed. The names implicated in these communications reached the highest levels of several national healthcare systems. As the evidence mounted, Dr. Kensington's lawyers requested a brief recess. When they returned, their client had changed her strategy. She requested to address the court directly. Standing at the podium, she showed no remorse. Instead, she launched into a passionate defense of her work. "What we did was necessary for the advancement of human evolution," she declared. "In 50 years, people will look back on this moment and realize we were pioneers, not criminals." Her words sent murmurs of disgust through the courtroom. But it was Mei Chen's quiet strength that provided the most powerful rebuttal. When given a chance to speak, she stood slowly, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. "You talk about evolution," Mei said, her voice clear and strong. "But you forgot about the most important part of being human, our ability to choose, to love, to protect our children. You didn't advance humanity. You betrayed everything that makes us human." The preliminary hearing concluded with Dr. Kensington being held without bail. But the case had opened a Pandora's box of ethical questions about genetic research, medical consent, and the increasing ability of technology to modify human genetics. Rachel returned to Cascade Health with a new mission. She began implementing sweeping reforms to ensure nothing like this could ever happen again. Every research project would now be subject to multiple layers of ethical review, and patient data protection would be strengthened beyond industry standards. Detective Wong's investigation continued to expand as more of Helios's network was exposed. Law enforcement agencies worldwide began raiding suspected facilities and arresting conspirators. But some questions remained unanswered, particularly about the fate of the genetically modified embryos that had been created in Helios's labs. As Part 5 drew to a close, the impact of the case was still rippling through society. Medical ethics boards worldwide began reviewing their protocols, and governments started drafting new laws to regulate genetic research. But for Mei and David Chen, sitting quietly in their renovated nursery at home, the most important change was much more personal. They were finally free to look forward to the future, knowing that their story had helped protect countless other families from similar horrors. 6 months after Dr. Kensington's preliminary hearing, the world of medical research had changed dramatically. The Helios scandal, as it came to be known, had triggered a global reckoning in the field of genetic research. Rachel Zhao found herself at the center of this transformation, testifying before congressional committees and advising international medical organizations on ethical practices. But on this particular morning, she wasn't thinking about policy changes or regulatory reforms. She was sitting in a hospital waiting room with Detective Wong, anxiously awaiting news about Mei Chen, who had gone into labor earlier that day. The story of Mei's pregnancy had captured hearts worldwide. After everything she had endured, the fact that she was now having a healthy, natural pregnancy seemed like a miracle. Women's rights advocates and medical ethicists pointed to her story as a powerful reminder of the importance of patient autonomy and informed consent. David paced the waiting room, occasionally stopping to stare out the window at the Portland skyline. The same hospital where his wife had once worked as a nurse was now preparing to welcome their child into the world. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone present. Meanwhile, across the globe, the ripple effects of the Helios investigation continued to spread. In Singapore, Dr. Lin Jing had established a watchdog organization dedicated to monitoring ethical compliance in genetic research facilities. Her organization had already identified and reported several suspicious operations attempting to continue Helios's work. The investigation into Helios's board members had revealed an even deeper conspiracy. Several of them had children who had been born through the company's illegal genetic modification program. These children, now teenagers, had been unknowingly living with enhanced genetic traits. The discovery raised complex ethical and legal questions about their future and their rights. In London, the headquarters of Helios Pharmaceutical had been transformed into a research ethics center, funded by assets seized from the company. The building's sleek facade now bore a new name, the Global Institute for Ethical Medical Research. Its first initiative was a comprehensive study of the long-term effects of genetic modification on human development. Detective Wong received regular updates from Interpol about the ongoing global investigation. Several of Helios's former scientists had gone into hiding, presumably continuing their research in secret locations. But the network of law enforcement agencies was closing in, aided by tips from people who had been inspired by May's story to come forward. Back in Portland, Cascade Health had become a model for institutional reform under Rachel's leadership. She had implemented a groundbreaking patient advocacy program, ensuring that every medical decision was made with full transparency and genuine informed consent. Medical schools around the country were studying her reforms as a blueprint for the future of healthcare administration. The other women rescued from the mountain facility had also begun to rebuild their lives. They had formed a support group, meeting regularly to share their experiences and help each other heal. Their stories had become powerful testimonies in the ongoing trial, helping prosecutors build an airtight case against Dr. Kensington and her associates. As the morning turned to afternoon, the waiting room began to fill with more familiar faces. Lily, May's best friend who had never given up hope during the 5 years of her disappearance, arrived with flowers. Some of the nurses who had helped care for May after her rescue came during their breaks to show support. Even some of the other survivors from the facility arrived, creating a circle of strength around the Chen family. Dr. Kensington, awaiting trial in a maximum security facility, had tried to negotiate a plea deal by offering information about other secret research facilities. But prosecutors, armed with Dr. Parker's comprehensive confession and the evidence from his stroke-induced epiphany, held firm. The days of powerful figures escaping justice through legal maneuvering were over. The investigation had also led to a shocking discovery about Dr. Parker's own past. Before his involvement with Helios, he had been a genuinely dedicated physician, pioneering treatments for high-risk pregnancies. His descent into unethical experimentation had been gradually engineered by Dr. Kensington, who had manipulated his ambition and professional frustrations to turn him into her willing accomplice. Rachel's phone buzzed with constant updates from her team at Cascade Health. They were implementing new security protocols designed to prevent any future infiltration of their systems. Every employee, from janitors to chief surgeons, was now part of a comprehensive oversight system that encouraged reporting of suspicious activities while protecting whistleblowers. The media attention had begun to shift from the scandal itself to its broader implications for society. Documentaries and investigative reports explored questions about the future of genetic research, the role of profit in healthcare, and the balance between scientific progress and human rights. May's story was often featured as a cautionary tale about the human cost of unchecked medical ambition. As the afternoon wore on, David finally emerged from the delivery room with tears of joy streaming down his face. "It's a girl," he announced to the waiting crowd. "Both May and the baby are perfect." The news spread quickly through the hospital and beyond. This birth represented more than just a new life, it was a symbol of resilience, of justice, and of hope. In the face of humanity's darkest impulses, the simple miracle of natural childbirth had prevailed. Rachel and Detective Wong hugged each other, their long journey together culminating in this moment of pure joy. The baby's first cry echoed through the hallway, a sound that represented not just the beginning of a new life, but the triumph of human dignity over scientific arrogance. But even as they celebrated this moment, both women knew their work wasn't finished. Somewhere out there, others might be trying to continue Helios's work. The fight for ethical medical research and patient rights would need to continue. Yet today, in this hospital room in Portland, watching May hold her daughter for the first time, surrounded by a community that had never stopped believing in justice, they could allow themselves to feel the full weight of what they had accomplished. The world had changed because one CEO had chosen to look deeper, one detective had refused to give up, and one woman had found the strength to survive and tell her story. 1 year after the birth of May's daughter, Hope, the Chen family hosted a gathering in their backyard. The autumn breeze carried the scent of blooming chrysanthemums, and laughter filled the air as Hope took her first wobbly steps across the lawn. Among the guests were Rachel Zhao, Detective Wong, and many of the survivors from the mountain facility, all now bound together by an extraordinary journey of healing and justice. The past year had brought significant developments in the Helios case. Dr. Kensington's trial had concluded with a landmark verdict, guilty on all counts, with a sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The judge's statement had made headlines worldwide. Your crimes against humanity, disguised as medical progress, represent the darkest potential of unchecked ambition. But the true impact of the case extended far beyond one person's conviction. The United Nations had established the Global Commission on Genetic Research Ethics, GCGRE, with Rachel serving as one of its key advisors. The Commission's first act was to create an international registry of all genetic research facilities, with mandatory transparency requirements and regular independent audits. Detective Wong had been promoted to head a new specialized unit dedicated to investigating medical crimes. Her team's work had already prevented 3 attempts to establish operations similar to Helios's in different parts of the world. The detective kept a photo of baby Hope on her desk, a reminder of why her work mattered. The other survivors had each found their own paths to healing. Lisa, who had been held captive for 3 years, had become an advocate for patient rights, testifying before legislative bodies about the importance of medical consent. Maria had returned to her career as a teacher, but now also ran support groups for trauma survivors. Jenny had written a book about her experience, which had become an international bestseller and was being adapted into a documentary. Dr. Parker, still recovering from his stroke in a secure medical facility, had provided detailed testimony about Helios's operations, helping authorities shut down remaining cells of the organization. His cooperation had led to the recovery of vast amounts of stolen genetic data, which was now being returned to the affected families. Cascade Health, under Rachel's leadership, had become a global model for ethical medical practice. The hospital had established the Chen Family Center for Patient Advocacy, a department dedicated to ensuring that every patient had a complete understanding of and control over their medical care. Medical students from around the world came to study their protocols. The scientific community had also undergone a profound transformation. The scandal had sparked a movement among researchers to establish new ethical frameworks for genetic research. Dr. Lin Jing's watchdog organization had grown into an international network of scientists committed to maintaining ethical standards in their field. At the gathering, May watched her daughter play with the other children, including some born to the other survivors. Hope had her mother's gentle eyes and her father's curious smile. She was growing up in a world that was more aware, more vigilant, and more committed to protecting human dignity in the pursuit of medical progress. David had returned to software engineering but now focused on developing security systems for medical facilities. His experience had given him unique insight into the importance of protecting patient data and medical records. The system he designed was being implemented in hospitals across the country. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Rachel stood to make a toast. The gathered crowd fell silent, many holding their children close. A year ago, she began, we witnessed not just the birth of a beautiful child, but the rebirth of our faith in justice. Hope's name carries the weight of everything we fought for, the triumph of human compassion over cold scientific ambition. Detective Wong added her own words, this case taught us that one person's courage can change the world. May's strength showed us that even in our darkest moments, hope survives. And now, looking at these children playing together, we see the future we fought to protect. The investigation's ripple effects continued to spread. Universities worldwide had revised their medical ethics curricula to include detailed study of the Helios case. Law enforcement agencies had developed new protocols for investigating medical crimes. Insurance companies had implemented stricter oversight of fertility treatments and genetic testing. But perhaps the most significant change was in public awareness. People had become more engaged with their medical care, asking questions, demanding transparency, and understanding the importance of informed consent. The era of blind trust in medical authorities had been replaced by informed partnership between doctors and patients. As the evening drew to a close, May pulled out a journal, the same one she had left half-finished on her dining table the day she disappeared. She had finally completed it, filling its pages with her story, her hopes, and her dreams for Hope's future. The journal would be published the following month, with proceeds going to a foundation supporting survivors of medical exploitation. Rachel and Detective Wong stood at the gate, preparing to leave. They watched as Hope ran to her mother's arms, her laughter carrying across the yard. The sight reminded them of why they had never given up, even when the case seemed hopeless. In that child's eyes, they saw the future they had fought to protect, a future where medical progress would serve humanity, not exploit it. The story of the pregnant woman who vanished had become more than just a case file. It had become a catalyst for change, a reminder of the importance of human dignity, and a testament to the power of resilience. In boardrooms and classrooms, in hospitals and research facilities around the world, people would continue to talk about Mei Chen's story for years to come. As the sun set over Portland, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Mei held her daughter close and whispered a promise, the same promise now being echoed in medical facilities worldwide: never again would the pursuit of progress be allowed to overshadow the sanctity of human life and dignity. Hope Chen would grow up in a world forever changed by her mother's story. A world where medical ethics wasn't just a course requirement but a sacred commitment. Hope Chen would grow up in a world forever changed by her mother's story. A world where medical ethics wasn't just a course requirement but a sacred commitment. A world where the disappearance of a pregnant woman had led to the emergence of a new era in medical research, one founded on transparency, consent, and respect for human dignity. The case of the vanishing pregnant woman had ended, but its legacy would continue to protect generations to come. In the end, the truth hadn't just set one woman free, it had helped safeguard the future of medical research itself.